Welcome to the Business Vitality Podcast. My name is Cantey. I am the host and an executive coach. I work with teams, individuals, and leaders to help create measured leadership change. We do that using practical applications, and our clients are creating 100% measured results as seen by those around them. Not necessarily what I think or what they think, but what the other people are seeing. And they are being recognized for the hard work that they're doing. If you're interested in learning more about some of the work that we're doing, you can learn more at catherinecantey.com. I would love for you to subscribe to this show, to Business Vitality. This is my way to continue to pay it forward and share business best practices. Stay tuned and listen to the interview. Thanks for being here. Ryan Gottfredson, you are the founder, author, and expert of success mindsets found on the web at ryangottfredson.com. And also, we have a second guest today, Chris McKinney. You are the founder and CEO of 10X Leadership Consulting, found on the web at 10 xlc.consulting. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is great. It's great to be with both of you.
Yeah, it's good to see you both, and I'm excited about this conversation. I kind of want to give a little background before we dive into this. We're going to try something new today. I've worked with both of you in previous roles, really enjoyed my experience with you, stayed in touch with you. Ryan, you were on my podcast number 18, and Chris and I ran into each other a couple months ago, and he said, I really like that work. Do you know that I'm actually living what he's talking about in my workplace? And I said, oh, that sounds cool. So we started talking, and the three of us connected, and we decided we could jump on here and just kind of record a conversation talking about the research and the findings that Ryan has found, and how, Chris, you're living it in the government world and even beyond. And I thought it'd be great to just kind of apply real life to all this incredible research behind success mindsets and vertical development and everything else that you're doing. So I thought it'd be kind of fun for those that aren't familiar with success mindsets, vertical development, all that fantastic stuff. Ryan, can you give us just a high-level overview, or go as deep as you want? Because I know you've got an incredible framework, and I just want to listen to what that is as we kind of set the tone.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be fun to hear Chris's journey, and so hopefully I'll set the ball on the tee and he can knock it out of the park. But one of the things that I've learned is that there's two ways in which we can develop or improve ourselves. And these two ways are called horizontal development and vertical development. So horizontal development is adding new knowledge and skills. And this is like adding an app onto an iPad, right? When we gain new knowledge and skills, that broadens our functionality. And this is 95% or more of all of the development that is done. You think about a high school class, a college class, this is all horizontal development. And this is a good form of development, but it does have some limitations, right? If I add an app onto an iPad, that doesn't necessarily improve how effectively that iPad operates. It could just do more. But in fact, if I add an app, it may even slow the iPad down. But if we want to improve how effectively that iPad operates as a whole, we've got to upgrade its own internal operating system. And that's what vertical development is all about for us, is upgrading our own internal operating system so that we can better navigate and more effectively navigate change, pressure, uncertainty, and complexity. And I think that this form of development is what really everybody wants, but nobody knows much about it. And so hence why I do the work that I do. And so one of the best ways for us to vertically develop is to focus on our mindsets. So our mindsets are the mental lenses that we wear that shape how we view the world, and how we view the world affects everything that we do. It shapes how we think, how we learn, and how we behave. And so this form of vertical development is usually new to people, but it's starting with mindsets as opposed to knowledge and skills, which usually means deepening our self-awareness so that we could then elevate to become a more positive influence in the world around us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there is a shift in this leadership that we see today. The folks that are really excelling are able to go deeper. And, they always taught us leadership starts with yourself first. but not everybody gets that. And so what you're talking about is we got to go deep with ourselves before we can even begin to outreach and be able to help and impact and influence others in a positive way. So I feel like it makes sense. So I appreciate you sharing that. Did you have any other thoughts, Ryan?
Well, no, well, it's just to your point and here's maybe another way to think about it is most people are focused on what they do. And that's good. I think but the layer deeper is what we see. So for example, do we see risk as something to avoid, or do we see risk as a necessary step to make the impact that we want to make? Right. So that's where we get at the mindset level. But there's even a level that's deeper than that, which is getting to this deepening of our self-awareness, which is why and how do I see what I see? Right. To me, this is really powerful, because if we have one person that sees risk as something to avoid, and another person sees risk as a necessary step to creating their dreams, there's probably something that has gone on in their past that has influenced the mental lenses that they have. And so just the deeper we could go in terms of our self-awareness, I think, at least what I've learned is the deeper we go inward, the higher we can go in terms of our vertical development and being this, the positive influence that we all want to be.
Okay, you got me thinking of all kinds of relationships, but before I chase that rabbit and wonder, okay, what kind of experiences do they have to bring to the table because they have a different opinion? I'm dying to know from Chris. You've talked about this. We've had tons of conversations about just leadership and mindset and growth, and you've worked within numerous government agencies. And so I want to thank you for your service. I know you're in the military and keeping us safe. So thank you for doing that. And I really would love for you to be able to share an example of when you first saw success mindsets, this type of work, maybe at work or within some of this government work that you've done. Maybe you didn't even realize this is what's going on, but do you remember, or can you share an example of when you first saw that and what that looked like?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here, Katie. I appreciate all you do here in our local community. You do a lot, you and your family, to make us better. So I just want to say publicly, I appreciate all that you all do to take care of our community.
Thank you.
It's probably back in 2008. I was still in the military. So I served for 30 years and I retired in 2017. So I'm not going to do public math, but I've been in the military for a while and I had horizontally developed up until that point. And I was really good at what I did. And I could lead okay to kind of what Ryan was talking about, but I had not yet engaged in vertical development. And I made a pretty bad decision. And if I remember correctly, my wife probably tried to caution me not to make the decision that I made, but I made it anyway because I was in my emotions because I hadn't vertically developed. And it led to having a one-way conversation with somebody in my chain of command. And that's never good to have a one-way conversation. And it was at that point is when the light bulb came on. And it was at that point is when I didn't know it was vertical development, but that's when I started vertically developing because I knew I had to go to the next level because I had put myself in a not so fun situation, which also put my family in a not so fun situation. And then it kind of put a stain on the career I worked so hard to develop over those past years, serving from basically 18 to that point. I think I was about 38 or so. So at that point, I made the shift to start vertically developing, although I did not know that's what it was called.
So what was that first step? Was it just awareness, or what did it
It
feel like?
was.
Or what does it look like?
It was absolutely awareness. So I had the conversation and so he didn't yell, he didn't cuss. He made me think. And I went home that night and I started evaluating. It was that internal reflection Ryan referred to. That was the starting, like, oh, there's a gap. There's another gap. Oh, there's another gap. And so now what am I going to do now that I have this information? And it was at that point I started engaging with other leaders around me, mentors, to start down this path, right? Because you can't get there by yourself if you don't know where you're going. And so I had some key folks in my life help me to start walking down that path.
What are those? I mean, where do you find these people? Are these are folks that were working with you within the military, or these were outside, or is one of them your spouse? It's scary to think how much they know of us.
Indeed. So I would have to admit my spouse was one of those people. She did it from a very gentle from the side, not a very forceful way. And I also had somebody from my church and from the military. So I was fortunate to have a lot of sharp people around me. And I just hadn't tapped into them prior to this experience. And after having this one-way conversation and doing some deep reflection, I started tapping into my resources. And so there was a lot of sharp people that were vertically developed, and they started sharing insight and they started challenging me. So, Chris, well, why do you think about it that way? Why don't you think about it maybe this way? And they would put like a half-degree turn on what I was thinking. And it made me go back and do more deep reflection.
Well, one of the things that I guess I'm curious, Chris, as you're saying all of this is, do you mind like maybe stepping into the comment that you made about almost being driven by your emotions in that moment?
Yes. Yes. So I was in my emotions. I didn't like what was happening to me. So I wasn't thinking rationally. I was just responding. And my response was not an appropriate response to get to my intended outcome. My emotions led me to a response that subverted my intended outcome. And because I wasn't thinking rationally and processing, I really almost jacked up my career.
Well, this is reminding me of a conversation that I had recently with the CEO. I was coaching him, and one of the questions that I asked him was, why did you start your business? And his business has now grown to 1,000 employees, and he was the one who started it. And he said his answer was to why he started his business was to prove others wrong.
Huh.
And I found that just such an intriguing answer, because I think it says something about the space that he's coming from in terms of his leadership. And I also think it's actually tapping into his body's emotions. Even I would even call it his body's nervous system. And one of the things that later came out in that same coaching call, and he was great because he was willing to be vulnerable, but he said, I try to not let anyone know this, but deep down, I'm a very insecure person. And one of the things that I've discovered for myself in my own journey is it's really easy for me to try to cover up and hide my fears and insecurities. But even though I'm trying to cover them up, they're revealing themselves in a wide variety of ways, in the very ways I don't want them to come to the surface, right? And that's my outward manifestation of my leadership. And so one of the things that I've learned is as we engage in the vertical development process, is we oftentimes, to use your story, Chris, is we need partners in the process, because it's easier for them to see that connection to our fears and insecurities than it is for ourselves. And they could also help facilitate, and to me, this is the beautiful aspect about vertical development, is they could facilitate the healing that needs to occur on the inside, right? So for the CEO, it's healing from his insecurities. It's improving in his self-worth, that he doesn't need to prove others wrong to be somebody of value. He's already of somebody of value. Until he realizes that, he's never going to leave from a place of security to have the impact that he wants to have. And so, so I appreciate you anyways diving into that. And I don't know if you have any further comments about how even this may be a healing journey for you.
It absolutely is a healing journey. And I'll be brief because Katie, I want you to make sure you get to your questions. When I transitioned from the military into my local government role, I was the CEO of a 4-county agency. And there was this one incident. And fortunately, thank God, I had somebody in my team to help me. I had an executive coach. And so we were talking, but somebody was really, really disrespectful to me. And I was like, oh, no, you didn't. And I was ready to, like breathe fire and go down and just cause destruction. Fortunately, I had a coaching session and we talked it through, and he's like, well, what's that going to get you? Right? A lot of the questions you're talking about, like, is that your intended outcome? But in that coaching session, we did get the healing. He was like, Chris, what you just said, why do you got to prove anything to anybody? And I had to sit with that. right? And that was weighty, right? Because you got to unpack stuff from your childhood and way, way back, right? To like, why do I have to prove something to somebody? Why am I just not good enough? And so that really helped me not to subvert that. And really, out of that, I became way more effective because I had the courage to send other people to deal with people instead of me having to go because they felt more comfortable with them. I was like, okay, that works for you. That works for me. Versus getting in my feelings and going, well, no, you got to deal with me because I'm the boss.
I think that's awesome. The examples and a lot of the stuff just it hits home with some of my, self improvement and just wanting to keep learning and realizing this along the way. And kind of wish they taught some of this a little bit earlier into school so we could go ahead and get through this. Um, Brian, I would love for you. We know each other through a corporate environment, and I would love for you to kind of talk about I just say success mindsets as a whole, but I know it means so much more than that. But can you talk about and comment on how it can be applied not just to corporate, but to government, to nonprofits, even to just other communities that we interact with on a daily basis? Can you talk about how that works together?
Yeah, well, and let me try to lay a little bit of foundation and then dive into and answer that question. So let me give you, Catherine, I'll give you 4 desires. You tell me whether or not these feel like good or bad desires, and this will help our audience kind of understand what we're getting at. So, so the 4 desires are a desire to look good, a desire to be right, a desire to avoid problems, and a desire to get ahead. Does society say these are good or bad desires?
Oh, they're the best. They're all
Right?
good. Yeah.
Well, they're easily justifiable, right? Because who likes to look bad, be wrong, have problems, and get passed up? Well, nobody does. But so these are justifiable, but when we have them, where is our focus?
It's on winning.
It's on
It's on
ourselves,
us. Yeah.
right? It's on
Mhm.
us. We want to advance. We want to get ahead. And as I said, that's justifiable. But when we have those desires, and these are actually fueled by more negative mindsets, they're called fix, close, prevention, and inward. We end up doing what is best for us, which is oftentimes detrimental to those around us. And one of the things that I've learned in my own journey is when I first started learning about these mindsets, I found that I had all 4 of these desires and they felt right to me. And I think one of the reasons why I didn't have better desires was because I didn't know that there was better desires to have, such as a desire to learn and grow, a desire to find truth and think optimally, a desire to reach goals, and a desire to lift others. And the thing about these desires is they're not easy to get to, but they're incredibly powerful, right? So if I want to learn and grow, that means I've got to be okay failing at times. If I want to find truth and think optimally, that means I've got to be okay being wrong at times. If I want to reach goals, I've got to be okay not making progress, or sorry, if I want to reach goals, then that means I'm going to have to wade through problems at times. And if I want to lift others, that means I'm going to have to put myself on the back burner at times. And the reality is those at times moments are really difficult. That's where we talk about these emotions that are coming through. And so when I work with organizations and I work with for-profit, nonprofit, government entities, is at the root of all decisions are desires. And we've just got to ask ourselves, are these the desires that are setting us up for long-term success? Or are these the desires that are self-protective in the moment? And I think what I find is that the organizations who have a culture of self-protection, looking good, being right, avoiding problems, and reaching goals, they are doing their best, but they're also stalling out. They're unwilling to try new things, to do things differently. They want to hold on to what's worked in the past. And what I've seen in Chris and Cantey, and you could give your opinion on this, but what I found in the government sector in particular, one of the strongest negative mindsets that is there is a prevention mindset where we're more focused on avoiding problems than reaching goals. And that just it's well-intended, incredibly well-intended, but it also gets in our way of having the impact that we want to have.
Chris, you're nodding your head. I can't help but ask for you to share your thoughts if you're comfortable with it.
Oh man, you talked about avoiding risk, right? That is the mindset versus reaching goals. So in the military, unfortunately, sometimes when you get into the workforce that's been there for a while, especially in one location, that's the mindset. And then in outside and local government, many times, right? Like you wonder, like, why is the water department? All they got to do is shift their hours by 1 hour, and it's gonna make everything great for everybody. Like, why don't they shift their hours? But it's because of that mindset. And a lot of times, it's very difficult, from my experience, to even have that conversation because they're defensive from the beginning of the conversation, regardless of how you try to approach it, because this is all I know. To do anything different is scary. I don't like it. I might fail. It's not broke. Don't fix it, Chris.
That kind of leads me into my question that I've got for you, Chris, which is when we worked together, you had a very high functioning team, just great. And it was so admirable to get to see how you just really got them excited and energized them, and you got stuff done. And I loved it. I was like, man, I'm so glad he's here. This is fantastic. And so as I look at that, can you give an example of how this work applied to creating that team? Because we've talked about it, not on this podcast, but in other conversations. And so, you talk about how you first saw it in 2017, and then you just started working on yourself, and you began to kind of dig deeper in this and focus on that intended outcome and not just the moment of success. So I'd love for you to kind of share maybe a recent example of how that applied in your work with that incredible team.
Yes. So prior to getting there was a lot of good people working there, and they were doing good work, but it was a lot of horizontal development. There was very little vertical development. And I saw that, and we couldn't go with the vision I had in my head. There was no way we could attain that. And so, it led to some personnel shifts and new hires, but it also meant development. And so I know, Katie, you do coaching as well as Ryan. And so that's one of the first things I did. I said, okay, we're going to put money in our budget so you can get coaching, because I need more than me talking to you. And I know you're going to go, wah, 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 wah. Chris is just blah, 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 right? So I need somebody else in your ear to help you develop. And so we started and then I was challenging that thought process. And what I would do was we had a morning meeting every day during COVID. First hour of the day, it was mine. And we would talk about, well, why do you think about it like that? And I would have them get very, very vulnerable. I mean, they would be naked, if you will, in front of their peers. And we would talk about, was that the best decision? Why did you make that decision? What do you think drove that decision? Were you using emotional intelligence when you made that decision? Right? The self-awareness piece, Ryan, you've been talking about that. And it was uncomfortable, but we did it. And then the coaches would come on the backside in their coaching sessions and will reinforce it, not even us talking, right? And whatever was transpiring, they would reinforce a growth mindset. And so they all started in this vertical development. And the perfect example is there's a young man, he came from the private industry into the government. And people are like, Chris, why would you hire this guy? He knows nothing about government work. I was like, exactly. That's why I hired him. And so was he a little rough around the edges in certain places? He was. But through the vertical development, he grew. His leadership grew. His ability to influence grew, because he was a sponge. We read books together. He did the coaching. We would talk about the books. He and I would share articles back and forth. And I'm happy to say he just got hired to be the new executive director of the post that I held, right? To take the agency to the next level. So I think that is a great example of somebody vertically developing and then being ready for an opportunity, because had he not vertically developed, would he have been ready? Maybe. Would they have selected him? Maybe. But I know without a shadow of a doubt, vertical development was key to him being selected.
Fantastic example. Ryan, I'm dying to know, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's one of the things that I've learned about vertically developed people is one of the things that they do is they create space. So let me even phrase this slightly differently, is I think that there's broadly three types of people out there. Of course, this is always an overgeneralization, but there are good soldiers, there are progress makers, and there are value creators. And I feel like almost what, if I was to put words in Chris's mouth a little bit, of what he described with his colleague, is that maybe when they hired him, we had a progress maker, somebody who could move things along, but not necessarily a value creator. But then through, development and coaching and investing in that, creating the space for that, I think progress makers have a really hard time creating space for development, because when you're developing, you're not doing. And progress makers love to do. And so everything that Chris talked about is the shift from doing to being. And that's that shift from progress maker to value creators. Now we're not focused on doing. That'll get done as we focus on the being. And to me, that's the beautiful aspect about vertical development, is we start to see these shifts from good soldiers to progress makers to value creators.
What a great analogy of the work that Chris is sharing and the work that you're doing, Ryan. And I have to give you a compliment. I had you come in at a conference at the end of a marketing and sales conference a number of years ago, and you brought every speaker together at the end of your presentation, just like you did right there. It's a gift that you have. I'm sure you're aware of it, but I just want to highlight it, that you have a gift of being able to get the language to capture and just summarize and reiterate what we're talking about. So I have that appreciation for you.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, I love that. And I know, just personally, to be vulnerable and let you know that I'm trying to move from the doing to the being, and it's not an easy transition. So I'm trying to be humble and try to work through it myself. So I'm always open to tips.
Well, yes. Welcome to the club. Yes. It feels like a never-ending battle, and I think it will be that way, right? I think vertical development is a lifelong journey, and to know that we're on the path, it seems like we're heading in the right direction.
All right, Ryan, you've had a few things that have happened in your world since we last spoke on the podcast. Do you mind kind of giving an update on what you're working on? It sounds like some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so it's introducing these concepts of vertical development into the world. And one of the primary ways that I'm doing that is a book that's coming out. It's October 11th is the launch date. The book is called The Elevated Leader, Level Up Your Leadership Through Vertical Development. And it's introducing what vertical development is. It's introducing these different levels, good soldier, progress maker, value creator, and then it's how you go about elevating. So it's designed to be a deep introspective journey that ultimately, to me, the most meaningful message of the book is that if we want to elevate and have a more positive impact on our world, we've actually got to heal ourselves. And to me, that's a beautiful message, and hopefully one that people can resonate with. So I'm excited for it to get out into the world.
I'm excited for you. I think it's going to be fantastic. I enjoyed your last book and am looking forward to this one. So thank you for sharing that. And Chris, you've got a lot on your plate all the time. I loved getting to work with you, and I love staying in touch with you because I just think you're got shots of inspiration all the time. You've got a lot of good stuff going on. Do you mind sharing just a quick update? Because good gracious, you got a lot. And congratulations for the work that you did that led this gentleman into this leadership position that I'm sure is just going to continue to grow and do wonderful things for, selfishly, our local community. So thank you for doing that.
And I just played a small role. This guy, he had phenomenal talent. I just created, as Ryan said, space for him to grow into what he could be, and he engaged in that process. But thank you. So for me, I launched the consulting business, focusing on working with small businesses and nonprofits, if you will, to get better. Because what I know is a lot of times mom and pop businesses don't have time to figure out why it's not working well. So it's either strategy, or it's your personnel, or it's your policies. And that's kind of where my focus is, to get in there to help mom and pops businesses, small businesses, if you will, be more profitable, because we all know small business is the engine of our country. And so the more small businesses we can have to be sustainable in the long term, the better our country is. So that's one of the main things. And also, I too have released a book, not just myself, me and a friend of mine, Henry Hayes. We released the book, Triumphant Transitions. It's out right now. And the book basically summarize it is, if you are transitioning as a professional, so you're going from being a teacher and you want to transition to something else, or you're going from being in real estate and you want to go into the nonprofit world, or you're going from nonprofit into the corporate world, whatever it may be, because what we know is sometimes we chase the money and not our passion. And then sometimes there's a call deep inside of us that makes us want to change. The book is designed to give you insights from myself and my friend on how to transition successfully. Both of us came in the military as E1s, and we retired as an E9, which is the top 1% of the United States Air Force enlisted force. On top of that, we both served in the role of a command chief, and the command chief is basically the top 1% of the top 1%. So that was a successful transition for us to the military. But he went on to be a city manager up in Massachusetts, and I took over the role at Santee Lynch's as the CEO of the Ford County Agency, which are positions not typically held by veterans. And so we take a lot of the lessons learned in those transitions and put them in a book in very bite-sized portions so you can take it in. But also, if you happen to have a kid that's a freshman, you want to put this book in their hands because it helps them to figure out how to be successful as a freshman. So by the time you're a senior, you probably got a better idea where you want to go to college and what you want to go to college for. Or if you're a freshman in college, hopefully, prayerfully, you don't have to take the 6-year plan. You can take the 4 or 5-year plan and get to your end goal by having a roadmap to guide you on how to be successful. So you can get it at Amazon or any other major book outlet, and it's out right now. So super excited about that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
Congratulations, Chris. That's a lot of good stuff going on. Same thing with you, Ryan. Ryan, if folks want to learn more about you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Best place is the website, ryangottfredson.com. In fact, I've got a couple of assessments there. There's a personal mindset assessment and also a new vertical development assessment so that we can gauge our altitude. So welcome anybody going there. Next best place is probably LinkedIn. So would be happy to connect with anybody there.
Awesome. Chris, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So 3 different ways. So like Ryan, the website is going to be 10xlc.consulting. Is the website, www. LinkedIn as well. So it's going to be Christopher H. McKinney Sr. on LinkedIn. And then on Facebook, it's going to be 10xlc. If you look for that, you'll find my Facebook page.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. Ryan Gottfredson, you are the founder, author, and expert of Success Mindsets found on the web at ryangottfredson.com. Chris McKinney, you are the founder and CEO of 10X Leadership Consulting found on the web at the number 10xlc.consulting. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If you like it, please subscribe, share this episode or this show with other people around you. The greatest form of a compliment is a referral. I really appreciate them. And if you think that you want to learn more about some of the work we're doing, I encourage you to reach out to CatherineCantey.com. You can schedule a call or just continue to read articles and information that we post out there. Thank you so much for being here.